Have you ever found as a project engineer, the project manager, that you seem to get some comments all the time from the reviewing agencies, and sometimes you get some red lines on your plans and your designs that seem to happen all the time and you don't know how to stop that? Have you found that when you're designing your models and your engineering models and your codes and all those different things, and yet there's these common little errors keep popping up? Why is that? How can I stop that from happening? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to end all those common comments and red lines that we all get. We're going to do that right now. The best way to get rid of red lines and comments is to take note of it and to address it head on. If you're commonly getting the same comment, the same red line, the same code that's not working right, or the same drawing that's not doing quite what it should be doing, then you need to write it down and say to yourself, I'm not going to do that again, okay? And the best way to do that is using engineering checklists. Yes, checklists, the dreaded checklist. Something you have to sit down and take the time to read every little line and check it off. Yep, did that, did that, did that. But you need to do it. Engineering checklists. These things are super important because how do you think those government entities are reviewing your plans and your designs? They're going down a checklist. They're making sure that they look for these little things because they commonly occur on engineering plans. And if you're getting the same comment over and over, that's why, because they're using checklists in those government entities. So how do we create a checklist? How do we make a checklist from scratch? There's two ways. One, every reviewing agency publishes their checklist on what they're looking for on your plans and your designs, even in your codes. Everybody does it. You need to get a copy of their checklist. You have their checklist, you go down that list before you ever give it to them. And you make sure that everything on that checklist is taken care of. And if it's not, you make sure it's either done on your plans before you let it go out, or you write down a justification why you're not doing it. And you put it on the plans as a note to say, we're not doing this because. All right. And now when the reviewer looks at your plans and he pulls out his checklist, he marks the same thing. Yes, he's got this, got that, because you've already checked it for him. You don't get the same comments anymore because you've already got his checklist and making sure you're proactive. You're not reacting to what a reviewer sees in your plans. You're proactive. Before he ever sees it, you've already taken care of it. Now, the next step that you need to do in a checklist, after you got their checklist, is to take a look at your own company's standards and requirements. In my company, when I do a design plan, I make sure that every detail, every note that's in a block is bordered. Now, why would I ever want to do that? It's not required by the government entities. They don't care about whether we border our details or anything. They just want to make sure the detail's on there. I do it because I think it looks professional on my plans. It's easier to line up all the details. All the notes are lined up vertically, horizontally. It looks very professional by doing it that way. Also, I can always identify my plans from every other company's plans because of those borders, the way we do them. It's a unique trademark to my company. Part of my checklist is to make sure that those borders on every sheet around every detail and every note block. Now, also I can look at other things that I need on my checklist, that not necessarily required by the government entities. I can make sure that the way we do our title blocks, we use a logo in there. It's not required by the government entities that we have a logo plus our company name and address and how do you contact us? Not required at all. But we make sure we have a logo. Most companies do have logos, but not all companies put those logos onto their plans. We also ensure that if our client has a logo, it goes on our plans because we want our plans to look unique and professional. Logos are one of the ways of doing that. So it takes pride in what we do. But there's also many other types of company requirements that we have that not required by the government entities, and we ensure that they're on our plans through checklists. I don't like an abbreviated street name. Let's say it's Brooks Avenue. A lot of times people will spell Brooks and then AVE. Not on my plans. They're always spelt out. AVENUE, the entire word. So that way there is no misunderstanding of what the phrase is or that street name is. I do the same in all my notes, and only on my tags that I have for grading tags or plumbing plans or traffic plans that we use abbreviations because they're used so often. Words like FL for flow line, FG for finished grade, EG for existing grade. These goes on our plans as abbreviations, but then we have an abbreviation block on the side in our legend that explains what those abbreviations are. Everything has a purpose on our plans, not required by the government entities sometimes, but it is for our company. That's how you create a checklist. And if you use your checklist every single time you do a set of plans, you do an application, you do anything engineering related, before it ever leaves your office, it's checked against that checklist. And you will reduce the number of red lines and comments that you may be getting from these reviewing agencies. Now, how often should you use a checklist? Let me give you an example. In the Air Force, on the flight lines, every maintenance crew of those airplanes, no matter what type of plane it is, from the big C-5s down to the T-1 trainer jets, there is a maintenance crew that goes out and maintains those aircraft. They have a book with them, a notebook. It's in there, it's a checklist. As they take out a motherboard or a panel of some sort, or if they're replacing some item, they follow a checklist to make sure everything is done in sequence and in the correct order, and everything is done correctly. That's because they do that because suppose they lose a wrench inside the fuselage of that airplane. The pilot goes out, gets in his airplane, turns the engine on, taxi on down the taxiway onto the runway, takes off, does a vertical climb, and then that wrench comes loose, falls back into the jet engine, and then all of a sudden, instead of going vertical up, he may be going vertically down and has to eject. $1 million aircraft, multi-million dollar airplane, crash because of a wrench. That's why they do a checklist. Every single step in the military, Air Force is done that way. Now in engineering, it's not necessarily as drastic as that, but our designs, if we make a single error in the way we explain something and it's misinterpreted, it can cost thousands of dollars to correct, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and sometimes into the millions, just because we miss something on our plans. That's why it's so important to use that checklist and guarantee yourself that you don't have those liabilities that we all talk about. Use those checklists, and you'll find that your plans are reviewed much easier in those reviewing agencies. I know you've gotten value out of this video, and you want to see more videos on the management of engineering. Do that by going right down below and subscribing to our channel. Also, hit that bell down there, and you'll be notified every time we upload a new video onto this channel. And then you'll notice over to the side, right over there, okay, that's the next video we'd like for you to watch on the management of engineering. So until the next video, please keep on increasing your knowledge in engineering and the management of engineering. We'll see you on the next video.